Romanus,
Hello.
let me ask you a question.
Shoot.
What do you, an upstanding black gentleman as yourself, know
I'm
about?
a gentleman.
I would say so, yeah. Personally.
I think you're the only person that I know that would say that.
I think I'm one of the only people that knows the gentlemanly side of it.
I don't show that side if it exists.
I think you mostly show the gentlemanly side of yourself. I see more of the ungentlemanly side of yourself.
Oh, okay. That's
No
good to know.
subtext.
Okay. Yeah, why not?
It's interesting. It's fun, though. But as I was asking, what does an upstanding black gentleman as yourself know about the Master of Suspense that is Alfred Hitchcock?
Oh, yeah. I've seen a few of his movies. I wouldn't claim to be an expert, but I've seen Vertigo, North by Northwest, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Foreign Correspondent.
That's one of my favorites.
I think between Foreign Correspondent and North by Northwest, those are my favorite.
Yeah.
Those are more thrilling, but they're not horror. You know what I mean?
I mean, most of his films are thriller-esque in some capacity. I mean, he's known as a master of suspense for a reason because a lot of his movies are built upon that suspense ultimately. But I would agree for myself as well. I'm in no means an expert on any of his films. I have a lot of blind spots, honestly, in his entire filmography. And there's tons that I've seen. Like I've seen Vertigo. I've seen Rear Window, Psycho, obviously. I never saw his one of his most acclaimed films, Rebecca.
Okay, I've read about it. I haven't seen it either.
Yeah, I know it's a very famous book, but I haven't seen his film on it. I know he got a lot of award recognition for it, but I haven't seen North by Northwest or Dial M for Murder either. But yeah, I understand why he has the title that he does. He is very good at crafting suspense, I would say.
Yeah, especially we chose Birds, and for our Halloween special, you were the one that recommended it, and I said, why the fuck are we watching that movie? Like, it's not even Halloween themed. But upon seeing it, I get it now.
Yeah.
It's a just masterclass of suspense and horror.
And just complete terror. Honestly, I really just want to dive right into this movie.
Let's not talk about our personal lives or dumb
we don't need
childhood stories.
Let's
just go.
Just because I got a lot to say about this. So, as always, everybody welcome back to our Loose Leaf Halloween specials. My name is Davis Leaf. I'm here with my co-host.
Ro.
You didn't have any other alter ego.
No, I didn't think of it. No,
that's okay. Usually, I've kind of seen you take him off the cuff a little bit. So that's
I'll think of something after.
You'll think of something. You'll have your closing one. We'll go through an hour of talking about this movie, and then you'll have one to close.
Alfred Blackcock. How about that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
That is wild. But today we are here to talk about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, which is a widely popular movie from 1963. It very recently celebrated a 60th anniversary, I believe. Yeah. Last year, I would say. And I have kind of seen this movie before when I was a little bit younger. I don't really think I saw the whole thing. I caught fragments of it, so when I rewatched it just last night, this was kind of a fresh watch for me. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I barely even knew what the plot or anything was. And this movie was really funny to me, like genuinely funny, because the best way I can describe this movie after I watched it was this was a romantic comedy that just gets invaded by a bunch of murderous birds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to be totally honest, I thought it was a masterpiece of a movie.
Well, I would say that it's a perfectly formatted horror movie.
It's very matter of fact for that reason too,
but also formulaic because I would agree with you. The first half of this movie, it's a 2-hour movie, the first half is a sort of romantic comedy or just like romantic drama with this woman who meets this man in a bird shop. And
it's got that classic meet cute moment where she's trying to like deceive this man into thinking that she works at this bird shop.
Yeah.
And he catches her grift, essentially, and says, yeah, I see what you're doing right here. I know your tricks, ultimately. We've met before, yada, yada. And this like kind of entices her. And it just begins this whole story of sexual tension between the two of them for the next like almost an hour. And while very nuanced moments of people kind of noticing that something's wrong with the birds.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with the birds around here, but whatever. And then eventually everything just erupts into complete chaos.
Right. Even at the Hitchcock does a great job at building the tension. Even at the beginning of the movie, the first part of the movie when it opens, the main character, Melanie Daniels, played by Tippi Hedren, is walking into this bird store. And she looks up in the sky and just sees all of these birds in the sky just congregating together, like just randomly flying.
Yeah. And that's just like the first indication that this is going to go somewhere.
Exactly. And then right before she walks into the store, you see Alfred Hitchcock cameo walking out of the store with two dogs.
I didn't actually notice that because I know he notoriously always cameos.
Go
in
back
a lot
and
of
look.
His films.
He's
yeah,
walking,
I didn't notice that one.
Well, he's
cool.
walking out of the store.
That's cool.
I've seen more Alfred Hitchcock interviews than movies, so I can recognize his face quite a bit.
I feel that. I just like for whatever. I didn't catch that. That's neat.
It's very quick if you don't miss it. But yeah, so
it reminds me of the Peter. That sounds kind of like the Peter Jackson cameos of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where he's always like somebody, like some extra in every single one of those movies, and it's literally a blink and you'll miss it moment.
Yeah. She walks into the store and she bumps into this lawyer, Mitch Brenner,
played by Rod Taylor,
the Aussie Rod Taylor, and they sort of have a flirtatious argument. You know,
I like it though.
Yeah, it's witty. It's a little funny, a little not. Like
it's very Alfred Hitchcock kind of like deadpan style of humor, and he kind of maintains that feeling for like the next hour between the two of them too.
Right.
Where like you said, it is very witty and funny, and it's got that will they won't they quality to it.
Yeah, exactly. And he pretends to look for these two lovebirds for his little sister, and he's asking her if the store has lovebirds, and she just pretends to be a worker at the store, and he actually recognizes her from, you know, just being, she's just the daughter of some multimedia mogul, and she's been in the newspapers for, you know, having sort of a crazy life.
So gossip journalism.
Exactly.
The subject of gossip journalism.
Right. So he's familiar with her already. And so he knows that she doesn't work there. So he's like testing her, like sort of, you know, teasing her, almost like, you know, a practical joke, they say.
Yeah.
And after they have their, you know, flirting conversation, she finds out that he's actually from some like small town outside of San Francisco. And so
just off of the California coastline.
Exactly. She buys the two lovebirds and decides, okay, like I'm going to drive these 2 hours to take these two lovebirds to this guy. And I'm thinking, was this conversation like, is she that swoon?
I'm thinking the same thing. I'm just like, that's kind of insane. And it literally starts to culminate into the point where literally she just kind of walks into their home, like their family home, and leaves those birds. And I'm like, this is wild.
It is fucking insane. Oh, and even
I'm suspending my disbelief a lot for those components of the movie, because I'm like thinking to myself, this is a 1963 movie. Sure. I'm just like, this is pretty crazy and outlandish, but at the same time, I'm like, I know this is going somewhere.
She also crosses a lake to do it, right? She could easily drive up a road in front of the house, but to surprise him,
and fucking
she crosses
Hitchcock
a lake.
Makes us watch her do cross the entire lake. It's not a snap edit of her at one side of the lake to the other. We have to see her start the boat up, just very, very slowly drive the boat across the lake, slowly dock it, and then walk into the house. And he makes it last. But again, because you kind of have an indication of where this is all going, it still also feels like that building of tension.
It's very.
I'm sorry.
It's very romantic comedy like.
It did.
Right?
It's screwball.
Yeah.
It's very screwball.
Yeah.
And he's just slowly building this, knowing that there's going to be a lot of dread that follows it. And it's interesting that he wants to get you involved with these characters so much just for the most horrific thing to happen to all of their lives.
Right. Yeah. For them.
Yes, it's part of that. I don't remember perfectly how he phrases the thesis, but the idea of like he likes to place a bomb under a table, allow the audience to know the bomb is under the table, and watch it slowly unfold as it's, about to go off, but the characters do not know that.
Well, he does that in this movie, actually.
And
we'll get to that scene.
Yeah, there is a moment. I don't know if we have the same moment in mind, but there is a particular moment that I really noticed that. It was great, though.
Yeah. I like right before the movie, you read, let's say you read the back of a DVD player to get the summary of this movie, and you see the premise. You're not going to take it seriously, but when you watch it, there's a method to his madness with this movie.
And it is dreadful. It really feels dreadful. Almost like by the third act, it's almost kind of tragic.
Yeah.
Because it's just like these ordinary people having a romantic entanglement, and Tippi Hedren's character, Melanie, is getting involved with the family, and you see her slowly start to kind of like comfortably assimilate into their family dynamics.
By the end of the movie, she is really involved in the family. A motherly figure to Mitch's sister.
Yeah, which is actually really sweet.
Right.
I really, because there's a really good moment where she's on the piano and her sister, and when she comes to their home for the first time, and her sister are having a very interesting conversation about her family dynamics, and her sister is already thinks that she's wonderful. Yeah. And it's very sweet.
She becomes a confidant with Mitch's mother.
That's such a good scene too.
Yeah.
There's that moment in the bedroom, and she's just that moment in the bedroom where her mother is like fallen ill a little bit because of this situation that she sees earlier.
Oh, we'll get to that too.
Oh yeah. There's I think we'll probably have a spoiler section for this movie.
Wait. What is the ethics of a spoiler section on a 60-year-old movie? Like what's the rule on that?
Well, I don't there's moments on this movie that I just don't know if people know actually happen, and it's very, very crazy to describe some of these moments, and it also would take a lot of the shock value out of those moments.
Okay.
If you know that they're going to happen, experiencing them for the first time.
Okay.
I mean, there's a couple moments in this movie that shocked me. One of which was that moment with the mother.
Then we'll have a spoiler section.
We can. I mean, either way.
It's not.
We'll give a quick disclaimer.
Sure. Where were we? No. So and just to even go back in the family, Mitch and Melanie do have a romantic relationship by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Right. So I agree with you with that, but
it's earned too.
Yeah. This is 2 nights, but they're under.
I know, but again, a 1963 movie.
Sure.
Again, I'm suspending a lot of my disbelief.
Sure, this movie does take place, I guess, over 3 days.
Yeah,
okay.
It's. I mean, everything happening in this movie is all in service of just basically making everybody get attacked by birds for no reason.
Well, fair.
Which is kind of what makes it a little bit funny to me that Hitchcock just spends all of this time and effort getting us involved in these characters' lives just to say, and now send in the birds.
Well, isn't that a critical part of any effective horror movie? You have to have very just ordinary characters because we have to relate to them. And then that makes it scary for the audience because these horrific attacks, these violent occurrences that are happening for no reason, or at least no reason that we can explain, that's what's scary. There's nothing stopping it.
It's the sheer bleak ambiguity of everything that just makes this movie so terrifying.
And he is the master of suspense because he can make birds scary.
Exactly. I think when I was watching this movie, it was reminding me a lot of Frank Darabont's adaptation of The Mist.
Oh, you love that movie.
I do love that movie because that movie actually scares the shit out of me. But granted, there's a little bit more of an explanation given in that movie to The Mist, but there is a lot of this bleak ambiguity and also elements of paranoia that play into both The Mist and this movie. And I think with the way that the movie kind of also wraps everything up, you're left with this feeling of pointlessness, where it was just like, some of these people get away, and what was it all for now? Ultimately, what was all of this death and destruction for? Because nobody seems to have an explanation for any of it. But that's more so prominent in this movie, The Birds. And
Sure.
that's what makes it, like you said, so terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic movie.
Very good. So this movie was also, like The Mist, an adaptation of a collection of anthological short stories by author Daphne Demure, who was also the author of Rebecca. So,
Oh, yeah.
this is the second adaptation that Hitchcock has done from that author.
Apparently, she didn't like the Birds, though.
Really?
She didn't like Rebecca or the Birds.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't surprise me. A lot of authors' adaptations.
The
don't
book
really.
takes place in England.
Yes,
Like,
and it was more of an allegory for World War II, I believe.
Yeah.
Where I believe Hitchcock, with the accompaniment of his writer Evan Hunter, he just went up to him and said, "I want you to take most of the ideas in that and pretty much scrap it, and this is kind of the direction I want you to go with it.
Right.
Just find a way to integrate murderous birds into the story."
Yes. Well, the murderous birds is funny. It's kind of comical because you might think, like, how are the birds attacking them, right? And so there's a lot of, scratching. There's scenes where kids are getting attacked by the birds.
And again, those scenes last. Like the schoolhouse scene where the birds the flock, the murder of crows, just literally fly over the school as the kids are darting out.
Yeah.
And that scene is like 2 minutes long of just watching all these kids get scratched up and attacked by birds.
Well, even before then, right? It's that the scene that I'm thinking of when Hitchcock talks about the bomb being under the table and the audience seeing it. There's a scene that Melanie's walking to the school
and she's sitting
right. And she's sitting.
That was the scene I was going to mention too. Yeah.
She's sitting just waiting for the school to close out for her to pick up Mitch's sister, and right behind her is a jungle gym at a playground. It's empty at first when she sits down, but when she has her back to the jungle gym, crows just start coming down and
they just
landing
start all
on the jungle gym.
Slowly perching. And it's like a couple minutes of that of just like cuts back to like a close up of Melanie's face, and then a wider shot of behind her of more and more crows assembling on this jungle gym.
Right, and then when she finally turns around, there's more crows than even we saw, right? Like, it just, like, he jams packed the frame with just a ton of crows.
And they're all real, too.
They're real birds. Yeah, apparently Hitchcock and the crew just caught birds around the set.
Yep,
like,
and
it wasn't...
They trained them to...
Yeah.
They did there were some scenes where there was a lot of prosthetic work.
Absolutely.
Or just animatronic work that was done. And then there were a lot of birds that they got from... like a lot of pet stores and things like that too. So it was a huge endeavor to really get these birds to do what they wanted. And for some of the shots, a lot of them were compositizations of actual flying birds into scenes too.
Yeah.
But I mean, it looks really good, and for the amount of practicality that went into it, it's like I did not expect that going into a 1963 film.
For the time, it is a very impressive and ambitious film.
Very ambitious. And it works. It pays off really well.
Yeah, I would say.
I mean, obviously, there's certain moments that date themselves, too.
Oh, of course.
But then when you're sitting there watching this flock of crows just assemble on the jungle gym behind Trippy Hedren, it's really scary to watch, and it's very slow.
Yeah. Well, you know what? There's even another scene that just shocked me, because there's very few, because it's old, there's very few times in the movie that are genuinely, like, make you, like, just, like, gasp. Yep. But there was one scene where they're sitting in the house, and they're just having dinner or coffee, and all of a sudden, they see a bird in the corner of the room, and they draw attention to the little bird, and then like 1 second later, just a ton of birds just come out of the chimney. And then they're like swarming the house, they're breaking everything, and they're chasing the entire family. So it just, in this moment of serenity in this house, the birds literally attack. They come out of nowhere.
And that starts to happen more constantly throughout the movie, too, where it has these serendipitous moments, and the characters are like in a very, very good mental state and a happy place for themselves. And then just arbitrarily all of these birds just start attacking. Like it really starts up when she's about to meet Mitch on the dock.
Yeah.
And then the first real attack happens when the seagull swoops down.
Yeah.
And then again it happens with that fireplace scene. Before it, like moments before that, there's like a birthday party that gets crashed by a bunch of seagulls.
Yeah. No spoilers though, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Okay.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
You were right. 1963.
Come on, man.
Like already watched this movie. It's really good. But after that, after the sparrows come all the way down the chimney, that's when things just kind of keep happening like that.
Right.
And things become more and more dreadful for the town.
Yeah. No, there's even I never saw the movie before last night, but I do recall seeing a clip of the famous scene where she's stuck in the telephone booth.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, that's a really famous scene.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of havoc going on outside. She's, like, constantly thinking of going out of the phone booth, but then, like, birds are, like, creeping in. You know, it's... Yeah, there's a lot of great scenes.
After that first moment, I thought it was really like there's a moment preceding that I want to kind of talk about too. But when she's in that phone booth and she's getting attacked, it's a really terrifying scene. It's really good, but it's funny to me because throughout most of that scene, I couldn't stop thinking about why did she leave the diner.
Yes,
but then I kind of remember it's like, well, Mitch was out there, and before the chaos, I'm assuming she was just fleeing out to go and help him or something.
Well, now what the hell would she do?
I don't know. I didn't think about it too much. Mostly I was just concerned, like, why did she even leave the diner in the first place? Because I didn't think she was trying to go and help Mitch.
Well, I want to go back to that because the scene even before then, it happens after the school attack, right? So Melanie's coming into town to warn the townsfolk.
That's the scene I want to talk about the most in this movie because that was my favorite scene in the entire movie.
I would agree.
Just an exceptional amount of dialogue, so many different characters, very eclectic group of characters, all just kind of debating what the hell is going on in the first place, trying to even surmise for themselves if they think that this is actually happening, because at this point these attacks have only been seen by a select few people in the diner,
right?
And it's all, while the dialogue is really good and the acting's really good and the setting and the blocking is great, it's also a really fucking funny scene.
Oh yeah,
because everybody just has such wildly differing opinions. You have that old lady who's kind of like the ornithologist. She's the ornithologist, and she's kind of taking the practical route. Yeah. And then you have the other like drunk guy in the corner who's just quoting the Bible. Yeah, who just keeps screaming, "It's the end of the world." And then you have that mother with her two children, and that's another scene that really reminded me of The Mist.
Yeah.
Because you've seen The Mist?
I have not.
Okay, there's literally a scene.
I take care of my mental health.
Good for you. That is a terrifying movie. But there's literally a scene in The Mist with Melissa McBride from Carol from Walking Dead is sitting there talking, like in the grocery store, trying to go out to the mist to get home to her two children. And then there's a scene at the end of the movie where we see her again with her two kids. But it just reminded me of that same character. But there's just such an eclectic group of characters trying to figure out what's going on, and then you see all the background extras just tuning into everything that's happening at the same time, and the dialogue and the exchanges in that scene is just so great and so brilliant. But again, no conclusions are drawn whatsoever.
No, and really Hitchcock is capturing just a full dynamic range of human emotion when it comes to fear, right? Like there's some people who are going to be terrified, like the mother with her two kids. There's going to be people who try to use rationale, like the ornithologist, like every diner has just the diner ornithologist.
Of course.
And then there's some people who are going to respond just through religion, right? Like the drunk guy at the end of the bar. And then, like most people in the background just listening, there's going to be people that are going to be completely confused and don't know what to think.
Yeah.
And so it definitely was an effective scene, and it just, again, goes to show how it really doesn't matter what the quote-unquote villain is in a horror, as long as the audience is convinced that the main characters are terrified.
Yes. And
that they can't explain why the birds are attacking or just what's happening in the movie. There's never an explanation in the movie why the birds are attacking.
And I think that's one of the most popular qualities of this movie is the fact that this movie's been analyzed and dissected for well over a decade now at this point, and there ultimately is no conclusion. And I think Hitchcock has given his own kind of personal opinions on what he thinks occurs in the story, but there really is no one reason as to why anybody states that the birds start attacking people.
Well, there's even that one moment in the diner when someone points to Melanie and says, these birds didn't start attacking until you got here.
Yeah. So
and,
there is a hint at a supernatural component to it too. And earlier in the movie, there's kind of like a hint at a biological component where what's her face? Is it Jessica Tandy who plays
the
mother?
Sister?
No,
the mother.
that's
yes, you're right.
Veronica Cartwright plays the little sister, but Jessica Tandy
Lydia.
Yes,
Lydia Brenner,
where she's talking to somebody on the phone about how the chickens are not eating and everything, and how they're theorizing that there's some sort of an illness that's happening as well. But again, throughout the entire movie, everybody keeps drawing their own conclusions as to what's happening until it just ultimately, very abruptly kind of ends and then doesn't give you anything ultimately.
No.
And I like that. I like that component because it presents a lot of ideas, but it never presents any one idea. And it's very nihilistic for that reason too.
Well, a few Hitchcock movies are like that.
Well, a few of them, yeah.
Just a few.
But it also just keeps the audience in suspense to the very end as well.
Yeah.
I think there's another really good quality about this movie that really manages to maintain its own suspense. And I think that's the fact that there's absolutely no score in this movie.
Yeah, you're right. And it's very effective because the sound is very much focused on the sound of the birds.
The birds, yeah. And there's they did a lot of really great sound work with the birds in this too. But I think it really started to hit me at that moment where she's sitting outside the playground and you just see all of these crows building up on it. And usually there'd be some sort of musical cue, like whether it's like some sort of like maybe like the screeching of a violin or something. Like,
maybe. Yeah.
Like that tension building. A lot of like contemporary movies will do that kind of stuff. But at that moment, no. It's just visuals. It's just the visual language of the story being like, this is happening right now. We don't need any musical cues. And anytime it kind of cuts to a new scene, nothing. No musical transitions, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And that's why it's weird. It's a strange movie for that reason, because it kind of breaks a lot of those conventions for horror. Because, again, starts off like a screwball romantic comedy, doesn't even have any sort of like romantic theme to it whatsoever. Like, even like there's a scene in the near the beginning of the movie where Melanie is driving to the town, and for whatever reason also Hitchcock makes us watch her drive all the way there too.
Yes.
And she's doing all these sharp turns.
It is a long scene.
And then you see the two lovebirds in the cage swerving as she's screeching. And it's so fucking hilarious to the point where already at the beginning of this movie, I'm questioning, like, is this for real? Am I supposed to take this seriously? Because this is genuinely really funny right now.
Hitchcock is just an eclectic guy, I think.
I don't know. I don't know what he's doing, but like it all, like you said, there's a huge method to this madness, because by the third act of this movie, it just all feels very tragic. Because there's another supporting character in the movie that I really like. Annie,
played by Suzanne Pleshette.
Yes, she gives a really great supporting performance. She has a couple of really great standout scenes of dialogue, like especially that scene where she's detailing her background with Mitch herself to Melanie. And it's very revealing. It's very open. It's almost like borderline melodramatic even. But then, like, okay, I guess spoilers, her fate ultimately is really sad, ultimately, because she just gets pecked to death off screen from a bunch of birds trying to save Mitch's little sister at one point. And it's those moments where it just starts to feel so tragic, because we've gotten involved with the lives of all of these people in this town, and now slowly their lives are just being destroyed for seemingly no explanation, but these birds are just going crazy.
And her death happens off screen too.
Exactly.
So it's like such a prominent character.
It's just as, like, because the characters come upon her like laying dead outside of her own home, and it's just as shocking to me watching the movie as it is to the characters that find her.
Right.
And I'm just like, wow, this movie's really, really just killing people off now. This is what's starting to happen. Like this whole town is being completely decimated by this attack from the birds.
The birds are a slasher.
Yeah,
they're
almost right.
They're breaking into people's homes and killing people.
Like literally, like so. Going back a little bit to the one moment that I didn't even want to mention, but it's just like the moment that Lydia comes upon another character in their home after going to visit them, and all of these birds had broken into this room and literally plucked this guy's eyes out.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very disturbing image that we see, but it's like the disturbingness of that image without seeing what had even occurred that makes it like, because again, the characters are now just starting to figure out something's going on with these birds at this point.
Yeah, and
there's like not a snap zoom, but there's like a snap edit right up to the face of this guy right when it happens, and it's like, what the fuck?
Very shocking for 1963.
Oh, definitely. And like if I was sitting in the theater at that time, and like violence, I don't know like how common like horror violence cinema was at that time.
It was not common.
Yeah, I didn't think
except
so.
For Hitchcock movies.
Exactly. Master of Suspense.
Yeah. And even in that's still at the point of the movie where the bird attacks are only happening to the family, right? So there's a police officer that goes to the house, and even though
he's
the
like
dead
trying
birds,
to rationalize it all.
Yeah, he suspects foul play, right? So
so it's kind of playing on those types of, storytelling conventions of like a detective story there for a moment too. And it's just like, because nobody could possibly believe what's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
Because it is so crazy. And by the time we get to that diner scene is when I think the movie really starts to settle into some of its like underlying themes of paranoia in a lot of ways too. I haven't been able to quite pinpoint like how to explain the paranoia, but like there are indications in the conversation of like Melanie is bringing all of this terror to this town for whatever reason, and they all want to start outcasting her immediately for that. And then she just like it's the mother that's like accusing her, the mother of those two children in the diner that's accusing her, and then Melanie just slaps her in the face.
Yeah.
And that was just like, damn. Watching that moment.
God damn. Just slap your mama.
I guess so.
It'd be like that.
Right in front of her kids.
Damn, well, what are they going to do? She did accuse her of having this bird attack. What else is she supposed to do?
I don't know, man.
She has to defend her honor.
I guess so.
Come on now.
It was probably the lovebirds.
You know what?
Which, again, is kind of hilarious because it's like the lovebirds can be a metaphor for both Mitch and Melanie, but also just themselves. That's why I kind of like how matter of fact this movie is without giving any answers.
Yeah, I almost think that it might be a mistake to question too much of it, right? Like, even if Hitchcock provides an answer, I don't know if there is one. It just is what it is.
Pretty much.
The birds are just attacking.
It's just a horrible situation that all of these random people happen to find themselves in, and then that's that.
But I would say, for anyone who wants to make a horror movie, I think that this is the perfect syllabus for making a horror movie.
I would say so.
And you can just plug and play any type of force of nature or just some, horror or slash or whatever. And if you have the same elements from this movie, just, making those interpersonal connections within the movie between the characters and, those just moments of isolation in the diner, in the phone booth.
I like when they fortify the house kind of at the end too.
And the birds at the end are like punching holes through fucking wood.
Crazy shit.
There's the one scene where like a fucking Mitch gets punched in the face by a bird. Like it just like that when the birds are picking holes through the wood, I'm like, all right, come on now.
Shit gets real.
Come on, man.
Shit gets real in this movie.
Come on, bro. I felt like I was watching the Terminator at one point. It could have been.
Which also, that was kind of considered like a horror movie in a lot of ways when it came out.
I was terrified of the Terminator.
It follows a lot of tropes of slasher movies. James Cameron's Terminator. I don't know. I don't really like that movie.
Oh, yeah. You don't like the first one.
I don't like the first one. Die Hard for the second one, though. And that's the only Terminator movie I like.
You know what? You didn't say anything too controversial there.
I know. How sad is that?
Yeah.
There's like 6 of those movies.
Are there 6?
I think so. It's like Terminator 1, Terminator 2, Terminator 3, Salvation, Genesis, then Dark Fate.
There are 6 Terminator movies.
And then there's the show.
There's
the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
They just came out with the Terminator anime.
Finally.
Oh. Why finally?
Kind of just seems like that concept would work best as an anime.
It's not great, but it's not as bad as the movies,
Most
I
of
guess.
them, yeah.
Right? Like, so know. It's, animation looks good.
That's
Story,
good. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, like you were saying with the birds. I mean, this movie is... It is a very good framework to look at if you're trying to compose your own kind of suspense horror thriller in some way. It's got the family drama. It's got really good practical effects. Tippi Hedren's really good. I guess we haven't really talked about the acting per se in this movie. I like the acting quite a lot in this movie.
I think Tippi Hedren is pretty good.
I think the evolution of her character is the most interesting component of it too, and especially in the third act. There's moments where I really think her range is at its best in the third act when she is really starting to like be this protective figure for Kathy. And that scene, which is like also kind of an iconic scene, but the final scene where she goes up into the attic and just gets attacked by that flock. And basically gets pecked to death.
Well, and she opens the door and she sees there's a hole in the roof. That's a pretty great scene.
That's a scary moment, too, because you notice, like, oh, they're in there. But then at the end, she has to remain after that attack in a complete state of shock. And that's where I think it's like, man, her acting is really, really disturbing at this point. Like, it's really scary. Like, the moment where they're trying to get her out to the car, it's like one of the last moments in the movie. But then she immediately looks outside and sees all the birds and sees where she is and snaps out of it for a moment. And she just like almost freaks out about having to like re-engage with any of the birds again. Cause she was just almost pecked to death by all of them. And then there's, that really great final moment where her and Mitch's mother kind of finally embrace and accept one another.
Yeah.
Where she almost becomes like this protective mother figure to Melanie in the same way that Melanie's been this protective mother figure to Kathy.
Yeah. And Lydia replaces Melanie's actual mother, right? Because she was abandoned. So there's that personal connection too.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
So there's actually some really wholesome family drama that exists under the surface of all this chaos.
Yeah, you've convinced me because we do see different phases of Tippi Hedren. At the beginning, she's probably quite immature, really into practical jokes, but also petty enough to not like it when people play jokes on her, and that sort of makes it so that she has to one up Mitch after he sort of gets one over her, right? And she is so immature in that way that she can't take a joke in that way, that she drives all the way from San Francisco 2 hours to this, small town in the Bay. And then when she sees Mitch's family, she is drawn to the connection that they have because right, like her mother abandoned her and her father, and her father's this like wealthy businessman that doesn't have a lot of time for her, and so she becomes more ingrained into their family, and her connection to them is tested during this attack, and I would say that they stick together overall as a family. It's wow. We've hit another level of the birds.
Yeah. Again, very, very similar to The Mist.
Oh God.
I'm serious, man.
Like, if you watch The Mist, Mist is like the birds, but with aliens.
Basically,
just in a grocery store.
With giant alien bugs from some other dimension.
Oh God.
Stephen King shit. I don't know.
Is it a Stephen King movie? A book?
Oh yeah, it's based off of a short story by Stephen King from a collection of short stories, kind of like The Birds is part of a collection of short stories from Daphne du Maurier. So yeah, the family drama is pretty on tact, and it's nice that I've actually felt kind of invested in where it all goes, to the point where it's like where the worst things that start to happen to this family because of the birds, it becomes more and more tragic. It's nice that supposedly they kind of make it out in the end, but the movie doesn't fully conclude itself. Also very similar to The Mist. And it just kind of, it's actually the ending of The Mist is a lot more tragic. But no, like, don't ever watch The Mist, because the ending will ruin your life.
That's, I think, the first time that you have not recommended a movie that you still like, right? Because there's been movies that just suck that you were like, don't go see this movie.
Well, pretty much anybody that's seen The Mist will just be like, that just depressed me for months. The ending of that movie is so unbearably depressing, and you'll always remember it for that reason. And it's so depressing even that when Stephen King saw Frank Darabont adaptation of it, he was jealous about the way that Darabont ended the movie, because it's not the same way that the book The Mist ends.
Right.
Because the ending of the book The Mist is a lot more similar to the way that The Birds ends. But the ending of the movie The Mist is not whatsoever, and it is tremendously worse and one of the most depressing endings to any movie you'll ever watch.
And Stephen King was depressed that he couldn't come.
I know.
With something.
Even Stephen King was depressed by how fucked up the ending of that movie was.
Interesting.
But that being said, the ending of The Birds is still pretty open-ended and ambiguous. And I like that component about it because, again, just creates a lot more discussion and interpretations to be had from this movie. And at 60 years of this movie's existence, it's still worthy of a really introspective conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Especially after this talk. When I watched the movie, I didn't think I had much to say, but no, I think it's a worthy Hitchcock classic.
I would say so. And
it proves his abilities. I
think this might be my favorite of his out of all the films I've seen.
See, I don't know if I fucking love North by Northwest, man.
I love Foreign Correspondent.
Yeah, the great movies. Yeah.
I think a lot of like his style of dialogue really bled into this movie too. But I mean, he's a great dialogue writer in general, or just director of a lot of dialogue too. But
this was the beginning. Apparently, he ruined Tippi Hedren's life.
I was kind of waiting to mention that too, because there was a lot of controversy behind the scenes. Apparently, Tippi Hedren did not have a good time making this movie.
Right.
Apparently, she was injured on numerous occasions while making this movie, and there were some alleged advances made from Hitchcock himself.
Right.
Which I believe was kind of a common practice for him with a lot of the women that he was directing.
He overall didn't respect actors.
No.
He thought of them as like cattle.
Yeah. Just herding them into his own little den.
Yeah. He talks about that in a Dick Cavett interview. Like,
Interesting.
He just does not care about actors.
Did you ever see the kind of loose biopic about his life during the making of Psycho with Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren?
I don't. Oh, I know the movie that you're talking about, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, I saw it when it came out. It was enjoyable enough, not the most memorable, but a lot of that movie's commentary, it kind of paints a neutral picture of Hitchcock himself, and a lot of the movie is actually from the perspective of his wife. But she does kind of talk about how he becomes very attached to a lot of his younger female actors.
What year did that come out?
I want to say 2014, maybe.
Well, the issue it came out in 2012. It's just called Hitchcock, I guess. Yes. Okay. I say that because there's another movie called The Girl that also came out in 2012.
I've heard of
and
that.
It's about
film.
Tippi Hedren, and it's
got like Toby Jones in it, and is it Sienna Miller that plays Tippi Hedren?
Yeah, Sienna Miller plays Tippi Hedren. Toby Jones plays Alfred Hitchcock.
You know what? I do remember hearing about that movie.
Yeah.
I really do.
I haven't seen it, but apparently it does not paint a great picture of Hitchcock.
No,
but that's interesting how
both came out the same year.
Yeah, and just paints two completely different pictures of the same person.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it does not surprise me whatsoever that this, old English white man was probably a little bit creepy to a lot of the women actors on his sets.
Well, one movie's from the perspective of his wife, and the other movie's from the perspective of a person that he worked with. So
was apparently under contract for 7 years or something.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's back in the day in movies,
and really did not allow her, Tippi Hedren, that is, to go and do anything else.
Yeah,
and she didn't seemingly really want to work with him again.
Yeah.
She's expressed a lot of gratitude, I believe, for the opportunity of her role in The Birds, but she rightfully holds a lot of resentment for the treatment that she faced on set for that movie.
Completely understandable.
And it's really a shame because Tippi Hedren is really good in this movie. The best performance of the film. I mean, it's packed with a lot of good performances. Jessica Tandy's great. Rod Taylor's great. Veronica Cartwright is really good. But it's like you're watching Tippi Hedren give a really, really, what should be her breakout role for a very long and successful career, directed by one of horror's greatest masters. And just hearing that there was such a huge disconnect, particularly because of Alfred Hitchcock himself, just not treating Tippi Hedren correctly. It's sad to hear that was happening under the surface of this movie, too.
Yeah.
But it's not entirely surprising given the period of time in which this was coming out and was harder for a lot of women in Hollywood to speak out about these kinds of things.
Almost impossible. In like to speak out about it and have a successful career, right? Like
Very much
you
so.
could not have both.
Absolutely.
And even today, I guess, like not even I guess, today it's still hard.
It is very.
People in Hollywood to advocate for themselves and maintain their careers. We see like in the Me Too movement.
Oh yeah.
Which is still very prevalent.
And becoming a lot more, people are becoming a lot more comfortable talking about these subjects today, but it doesn't mean that it's dissolving the existence of these kinds of things happening.
No.
So
she is in the Bird sequel.
I have heard that.
Yeah.
The made-for-TV sequel from the 90s.
Yes.
But apparently she does not play the same character.
No.
Which is kind of weird.
Yes, it is.
But, you know, beyond all of that drama, it's still a terrific movie. And
the Bird sequel?
Of course.
Made for TV?
Better than the original.
Oh,
really.
okay. Yeah, take that, Hitchcock.
Yeah, fuck y'all.
Yeah.
Fuck out of here. But, I mean, I recommend this movie highly. I think it might be my favorite film that I've seen from Hitchcock, but again, I do have a lot of blind spots that I need to catch up on in his filmography. But I highly recommend this. Is a really good movie for Halloween time, too. It's very suspenseful. It's very thrilling at the same time. Light for, like, the first half of it, and then exceedingly dark for the second half of it.
I would say this is another movie where if you want an introduction into horror, like ease your way into the genre, start with The Birds. Why not?
This is a good one.
Yeah.
This is a really good one. If you're watching it, and because it's so worthy of conversation, it does feel like a classic.
Yeah, when I was watching this, I really thought about The Exorcist because half of the movie is a personal drama with some, just moments of horror in the beginning, just sprinkled in to build tension. And then after that first hour, that's when you see a rising action, just a lot of horror. The tension just explodes, and then you get what everything was built up for.
This had me reflecting a lot on the influences of the slasher genre and things like that too, and just horror, like where horror would go beyond that point, because Hitchcock made Psycho in 1960, and then 3 years later he follows it up with The Birds. Side note, it's kind of funny because apparently a Birds related incident happened in Europe at the same time that the book had been published for this.
Wow.
And it was Hitchcock loosely wanted to influence this movie based off of that incident as well too. And I think it gets mentioned at one point in the movie too. But after The Birds had come out and it just feels so arbitrary, 10 years later you get something like The Exorcist, which is also a very arbitrary feeling horror film. And then also the other night I decided to do my annual rewatch of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original 1974 one.
Oh my god.
Still just an absolute nightmare of an experience that movie is. It's a solid
Sounds great.
It's a solid 80 minutes long. It's a terrifying 80 minutes. It's very, very, very grotesque and violent.
I feel sick.
Yeah, and that movie also feels very arbitrary in its approach too, where it just happens to be this, group of young kids traveling through the countryside of Texas when all of a sudden they stumble upon this murderous family that's trying to hack them to bits with a chainsaw. The last 20 minutes of that movie alone is just absolutely riveting. Very, very hard to watch at times. But it made me think about how arbitrary a lot of those situations start to feel during this era of horror. Because flash forward after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you had John Carpenter's Halloween, like 4 years later. And that movie also just kind of feels like just some random serial killer walking around this town, killing people to no end, ultimately.
Yeah.
And it's interesting where horror has kind of ended up now today, because it always kind of feels like there has to be even more of a direct social commentary or a reason for things that are occurring right now. And it can be very, very introspective and thought-provoking and layered, but at the same time, a lot of horror movies these days just don't feel like they have this absent-mindedness to them, where it just doesn't want to give an explanation for why anything here is happening. It just wants the happening to happen, and that's it. Imagine what M. Night Shyamalan could have done if he really locked into the happening.
I knew that was coming. Well, you don't want Mark Wahlberg to try to talk to the birds. like Mitch should have just talked to the birds. Like, we're just gonna leave. I'm just gonna put my family in the car and drive away. You don't have to attack us, okay? Yeah, go see Birds.
Check out the birds. Check out the birds. It's a good movie. It's
The
a classic. The birds.
The Birds.
The Exorcist.
But bird. Bird is a word. I said a bird. Bird is a word. I said a bird. Bird is a word.
Well, everybody, thank you for our discussion on The Birds. This is a great movie. Check it out. As always, if anybody has any question, contribute to our leaf pile at looseleafmedia.com.
Looseleafmedia95@gmail.com.
I'm going to let you do these. I'm going to let you do our last rites.
Yeah, why not? Our last rites. Jesus, like The Exorcist. Wow.
that take you off track.
Yeah, if you have any comments, complaints, you want to just rip us apart, you want to contribute to our leaf pile.
We encourage that.
We encourage, yes, especially those just nasty comments, please.
We deserve it.
Yes, we do. Please send all of that to our Gmail account, looseleafmedia95@gmail.com. That is looseleafmedia95@gmail.com.
And as always, we can't wait for the next one. We got one more episode that we're going to be doing after this. Stay tuned for that. That'll be dropping on Halloween Day. So, as always, my name is Davis Leaf. This has been a Loose Leaf Halloween special. Did this with my co-host,
Rod Taylor.
And I will... Oh, you're alive.
Oh, yes.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Loved your performance of The Birds.
I appreciate that.
Very, very one-dimensional and so very driven.
Good night, Mike.
Good night. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Happy Halloween.